It is our countdown to Kansas City segment. We absolutely love these. So from now until the NWSL Championship, which is set for November 23rd at CPKC Stadium in Kansas City, you can watch it on CBS at 8 p.m. And if you're wanting to attend, tickets are now live at nwslsoccer.com. Get your tickets. But we are revisiting every past NWSL final and championship. Last week, we hit up the 2015 final. This week, we are doing the 2016 NWSL final between the Washington Spirit and the Western New York Flash. I'm not burying in the lead because this happened 8 years ago. The New York Flash win ultimately. It took them a bit to get there. We're going to dive into absolutely all of it. Western New York Flash, we're back in the championship for the first time since 2013, and Washington make their first final appearance. The 2016 final was at a neutral site, BBVA Compass Stadium in Houston, Texas. It took place Sunday, October 9th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Over 8,000 fans in attendance in Houston. And I love throwing this question to you, Sandra. Before we did our research for this segment, how much of it did you already know? Did you already remember? And how much of it did you have to go back and look up and rewatch the game, rewatch the highlights?
Oh, God bless the 2016 NWSL season. I think there was a little part of me that was really excited to build ourselves up to this moment, because for me, it has personal significance. This was the first NWSL championship final that I made the decision to take in person. So it feels, the memories still feel as fresh as they were last year's final when I was out there in San Diego. And I was just so excited to get to this moment because I think there's some layers to this championship that we'll talk about, for both of these teams that met in the final and how things kind of played out along the way.
Absolutely. The playoffs were lined up like this. So Washington Spirit, they finished second in the standings behind Portland. Washington had 39 points. Crystal Dunn, a forward on this Washington side, she had a number of goals throughout the year, a number of assists. She was electric up top. And goalkeeper Steph LeBay came into the finals on 5 clean sheets. Western New York Flash, meanwhile, they finished fourth in the final playoff position in 2016 with 32 points. At that point in the season, forward Lynn Williams on the Flash had 11 goals. Forward Jess McDonald had 10 goals. Jess also led the team with 7 assists. She was second in the league that year. In the playoffs for both of these sides, the Western New York Flash took on Shield winners Portland. That ends in extra time, 4-3 to the Flash. There was also 6 yellows, a scrappy first semifinal game for the Flash and the Thorns. Meanwhile, Washington Spirit, they took on third place Chicago Red Stars. It was a 2-1 win to the Spirit, also in extra time. Now, this was your Chicago team, Sandra, who still is your Chicago team. Do you remember this semi between Washington and the Red Stars?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lisa, I'll even take it a step further. This was such a up and down season. I believe that this was just the year where maybe the league was trying to figure out best practices, and they kind of maybe introduced, or were thinking about introducing, like regional rivalries, right? Trying to like limit traveling so teams only face each other a certain amount of times. And to close out the regular season, the Spirit and the Red Stars faced each other in what was ultimately the final regular season home game. And the Red Stars absolutely dominated the Spirit in like just the week prior that they had to ultimately meet in the semifinal. So there was some mixed energy around it. It was like, okay, this Chicago Red Stars team is very special. They're putting together a very good season. Kristen Press is 100% who she is. We're looking at the core of Chicago's team. They're now in kind of like not a sophomore season, but that draft class is in like a junior season. They're looking like seasoned pros. And then you have this semifinal that goes into extra time. And it just felt like that was a natural conclusion, that those two teams were going to need maybe a little bit of extra time to kind of figure things out, because they had literally just faced each other the week prior to close out the regular season.
I
And
love that. I
of,
love
of course, it was, Franny Ortega who delivers the final knife to that incredible season for Chicago. But it was an equally incredible season for the Spirit, because they were also playing on a bit of a mission themselves. It looked like they were playing with a bit of intention, because they were this team that also saw themselves in the mix of postseason conversations. And now maybe this was going to be the season that they broke through.
2016 was a really pivotal year in the NWSL because it was its 4th year of existence, and the previous professional leagues in the United States had all collapsed after 3 seasons. So the fact that the NWSL was in its 4th year gave everyone, fans, players, coaches, media personnel, butterflies almost, right? Because it was finally, we had kind of gotten over the 3rd year hump, and we are in the 4th year of existence. The energy is different. The fans are showing out. And we got to see that in the 2016 season. Of course, the semis leading up to the huge final that took place in October in Houston. Washington Spirit against Western New York Flash. We've got lineups coming at you. Take us through Washington Spirit, Sandra. Who did they roll out with for the 2016 NWSL Final?
Yeah, absolutely. What a team. It was Kelsey Weiss holding things down in goal, Caprice Didasco, Shalina Zadorsky, Megan Oyster, Ali Krieger, Tori Huser, Christine Nairn, Whitney Church, Franny Ortega, Crystal Dunn, and Estefania Banini to round out their starting 11. What a team.
It's so funny to see some of these names, right?
Yeah.
Still playing in the league, whether they've just retired. It's crazy. It actually makes me feel pretty old. It does. It does.
There's been layers of that in this project that we're doing too. In this series, we're definitely like, oh, we've been around.
Yeah. So Megan Oyster, who you mentioned, who was playing center back alongside Shalina Zadorsky. Now Megan Montefusco
with the
Pride, though, but married, name change. We try to keep you guys updated on who these players were and who they are. We try our best.
Yeah.
For Western New York Flash, they rolled out with Sabrina D'Angelo in goal. Across the back line, it was Jaylene Hinkle, Alana Kennedy, and Elizabeth Eddy as the center backs, or as one center back, Abby Dahlkemper, and then Elizabeth Eddy in the back line in the midfield. Abby Urseg, McCall Zerboni, Sam Mewis, and Mackenzie Doniak. Up top, it was dynamic duo Lynn Williams and Jess McDonald. We talk about feeling old and kind of crazy. So many of these players still play in the league, or still involved in the league at a very high level. Pretty cool to think about. For Western New York Flash, they were being coached in this final by acting head coach Scott Vallow. Their head coach at the time had received yellows in the semi, so unavailable. That was Paul Riley, and a number of subs that came into this game, including Taylor Smith and Kristen Hamilton for the Flash in this game. But this was a back and forth game on both sides of things. Washington goes up, and then the Flash come back. Washington scores again. It was so back and forth. But Sandra, even more special than us talking about the game is you were there. You got to be in Houston at the 2016 NWSL Final. Take us through that experience.
Yeah, buddy, it was cool. I'm not gonna lie. There was a newness about it for me, because, like I said, it was the first one that I was gonna attend. So it was excited to have my ticket to attend what is supposed to be the biggest show in women's American professional soccer. But it was also Houston, so it was incredibly hot during the time, and that was also part of the narrative and the storylines going into this final. So while I was there to try to give some coverage, in a media capacity, I still definitely wanted to catch this game on the sidelines and up close and personal. And it was doozy for lack of a better word. There was excitement in the beginning. There was obviously a ton of drama towards the end. There were some tough moments and stretches throughout that game as well. This is also the game where Caprice Didasco unfortunately sustained an ACL injury, and then the trajectory of her career shifts a little bit before she makes an incredible comeback to ultimately win Defender of the Year later on. I believe it was in 2021. But I think for me, what was so unique about this, and having had some time to attach and kind of think about it, there was also an equal amount of chatter around the NWSL final and its current trajectory at the time about how this event looked and felt and what it was going to look and feel like in future events. This was only year 2 of a neutral site, Lisa. So a whole predetermined selected site for the final. And part of that shift was to make this feel like a big event for NWSL, that this was the culmination of things, a celebration of sorts, alongside 2 teams going head to head for a title. And with that always comes the chatter around what can be done better, because some of the things I remember again was the heat, the very excessive heat, how tough that was, bright sun, the fact that maybe with a build up to time to plan around a neutral site, ticket sales maybe weren't as ideal, or I think I certainly know it was below 10,000, and that was, for a final, considered maybe a little bit disappointing. Although I had a blast and I had fun, I'm someone who's locked in and invested in there. But in terms of like making something a marquee event to attract like a casual, there were a lot of conversations about how that can go moving forward. So it was a great trip. I went with friends. Shout out to Chelsea. Shout out to Liz, who I sat with on the sideline to take in this game. I also want to shout out Jen Cooper as well, because she's deeply invested in the Houston area, and got to give the keeper some respect here, because talk about being ahead of the moment, understood the opportunity in front of NWSL and Houston as a market, and had an event. I believe it was like a little kind of a WOSO community event, and people could go and hang out. And I went to that. I attended that. It was a lot of fun. Got to interact with a lot of people who are passionate about the league and the space. And a former Houston Dash player by the name of Haley Carter was still very active in Houston circles, and spoke at that event as well. And this was long before her days as an incredible GM for the Pride. But it was a beautiful moment, because it's just like this. It gives you that feeling. You're just like, oh, like this is sort of like where it all happens, and you get to see all these things come to life. So while there were maybe some mixed, interpretations of the final end product, the beginnings of something special, you can still feel were being built along the way.
It became an event, it seems like, with people talking and organized things. And maybe I shouldn't say so event and organized, because they seem still a bit grassroots led, right? Yeah. You shouted out Jen Cooper, who is a local to Houston and is able to kind of bring in those people and encourage that community to come together. And being at a neutral site, it does change things in terms of fans, right? Because if you're Portland Thorns and you're hosting the final, you're more likely to get a couple fans out. And when we talked about the 2015 NWSL final, we saw a huge bump in attendance, 3 times what it was in 2014, but that's also on the heels of the 2015 Women's World Cup. So there are still elements of growth that are happening, but that doesn't mean that there weren't still fans there. I mean, you talked about at the events, the people you heard spoke, and there were fans in Houston for this final. What do you remember? Was it Flash heavy? Was it Washington heavy? Or was it really neutral in the stands?
There was a good contingency of Spirit supporters for sure. I think as far as the game and what it was giving, you could feel how neutral it was. There were moments where you heard like Ali Krieger chants, Spirit chants, but then as a game gives what it gives, you heard people kind of like getting behind the Flash at times, which is I think what you kind of want, from a neutral site. But I think anybody who made it out there that day at an afternoon kickoff for Houston, Texas, God bless them. If you were there, say hey.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Definitely let us know if you attended the 2016 NWSL final in Houston, on socials, live with us on YouTube. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and let us know if you were there. Kickoff happens between Washington and Western New York Flash. An electric game, to be honest. I watched it back, the full game back. It is on YouTube. Shout out to our producer, Mark, for finding it for us. I love rewatching these games. So 9 minutes in, Washington on the front foot, the inevitable Crystal Dunn. She gives the 1-0 lead to Washington Spirit. The assist coming from Megan Montefusco, Nee Oyster. Back then, she was Megan Oyster. And it looked like Washington was just kind of going to roll for a little bit. Then Sam Mewis, she gets the opportunity to strike first for the Flash, assisted by Lynn Williams. And it's all tied up 15 minutes into this match. It was fireworks right from the get. Then there was a long stretch of back and forth play. There was aggression. There was really good chances for both sides, good saves by the keepers. But second half action, 91st minute, right? So it goes into extra time and we get a goal from Crystal Dunn. So she ends up with a brace in this match by the 91st minute. Ali Krieger getting the assist.
Oh boy.
And now Washington is winning 2-1. It seems like this is how it's going to end. And this is in extra time, which both semifinals had gone into extra time and now the final. So it felt normal, right? That this was going to 120 minutes. Of course, we get stoppage time. It's nothing like it is today. So 4 minutes, 5 minutes of added time at the end of extra time. And you can't count out the dynamic duo of Jess McDonald and Lynn Williams, because in the 124th minute, the 4th minute of stoppage time at the end of extra time, Jess McDonald just drops this absolutely gorgeously placed ball into the mixer. And Lynn Williams, with 2 or 3 defenders on her, she rises above and just heads this ball into the back of the net. 2-2, we're going to penalties. When you think back to the 120 minutes of play, Sandra, did you feel like there was one way that this game was going to lead, whether it's Washington or Flash?
Yeah, absolutely. Going into this final, I absolutely thought the Spirit were gonna snatch this up. And their start to this game kind of gave that a little bit. They were a little bit more active. They had a little bit more of the ball in terms of possession and what they were going to do with it. But the Flash did a very good job of keeping things even. And I don't just mean in terms of like the equalizer. There was a little bit of a midfield battle at times. I mean, this is an era of a Flash locker room with players who are gonna. This is the beginning for them. They end up playing together for a long time in a different iteration of North Carolina Courage, and we'll talk about that in the future. But we see them figuring things out. They had a little bit of a reputation in this league as kind of like they're going to come back and bite you, and they have nothing to lose, and that's a dangerous team to go up against. And that's exactly kind of how they played in this final, despite the Spirit kind of looking like they had a little bit more stretches of control during the game. I mean, I remember Sam Mewis's equalizer and being like, why are they giving her that much space? And then she gets that equalizer. Crystal Dunn getting the go-ahead goal in early extra time, where it just felt like that's it. It's going to be the perfect ending to their season. Krieger to Dunn finish. But then you have Lynn Williams come up with this equalizer. So it was some very, very fun starts to the beginning of the regulation, of extra time, and then bits of drama after drama after drama. And I think definitely felt like I got my money's worth for sure.
I wonder how much were NWSL Final tickets back then? Do you have any remember?
Oh my goodness! Like, you know what? I should have pulled up those receipts.
Yeah.
I could tell
you
you.
got your money's worth made me think like, I wonder how much.
I did treat myself, and I got myself a nice seat. So I want to say it was probably higher than maybe some other ones. It was my first one. You know, I had to go all out for.
And at your first one, Sandra, you got extra time and you also got penalties, because this game between Western New York Flash and Washington goes into penalty kicks. Up first, there's Dahlkemper, then Krieger, then Hinkle, then Naren, then Jess McDonald, Katie Stengel, Lynn Williams, Huster, Mewis, and Matheson. And for Sabrina D'Angelo, she was the goalkeeper for Western New York Flash. She comes up with 3 huge saves for Western New York Flash during this penalty kick shootout. It actually wasn't the best shootout. It was pretty bad, a little bit sloppy. I mean, 3 saves by a goalkeeper is great, and shout out to D'Angelo, but they weren't like the best shot
Oh, no.
kicks that she saved. Like, she
No.
still made the saves, and that still has to happen, but there were some bad shots. I love you, Jess McDonald, and she
Yeah.
was gonna join us to chat about this. Hers was pretty bad. Hers was pretty
Oh,
bad.
man.
She skies it over the
That's
top bar, and she could have won it at that point too,
ugh.
which is heartbreaker. But it doesn't matter because in the end, Western New York Flash win on penalties 3-2 over Washington. But the Pens, Sandra, they were a little rough there for a minute.
I think that's what is so funny about this particular final, right? Because we're talking about the things that it's giving. And the truth is, one of the things that it also gave was probably one of the worst penalty kick shootouts that we've seen in American women's domestic pro soccer. Just tough. And you have to imagine that a lot of it was, managing the conditions of a game. It was these are two teams that we said came off of extra time in their semis. Now they're playing in that hot, sweltering Texas heat. They go extra times, they go to pens. It's a lot to manage in the moment. So maybe that was reflected in some of the penalties, because equality, right? It was both. There were some tough misses on the Spirit side and on the
Yeah.
New York Western Flash side. So we're talking about level playing fields here of badness.
Bad ones for the first ever penalty shootout in an NWSL final. Ultimately, goalkeeper for Western New York Flash, Sabrina D'Angelo, is named the MVP of the final, the first goalkeeper to win it, not only because her play in the 120 minutes of play, but her 3 huge saves in the penalty shootout. Lynn Williams ends the season as the Golden Boot winner, 11 goals in the regular season. She was also, at the end of the finals, named the league MVP of that year. It was a good one. Western New York Flash lift the trophy. If you're with us live on youtube.com/attacking third watching it, we're throwing up a lot of great throwback pictures. Lynn Williams looks like a baby.
Yep.
She looks really young in a lot of these
Yep.
photos. It's cool to see her and how she has continued to progress and stay at the top of her game, even now in 2024 in the NWSL.